Sup, Kimosabi? I'm Leon, the Paperback Maniac, coming at you with another vintage horror book review. Tonight, we are taking a look at Live Girls by Ray Garton. This book was published by Pocket in 1987. I'll go ahead and read the synopsis from the back cover. On the hardcore street that never sleeps, Davey Owen is lured into the nightmare of the damned. He's lost his girl, blown his job, and he's looking for consolation in the seedy precincts of Times Square. As dusk falls, a garish glow envelops the street where Live Girls beckons Davey through its doors into a world of strange, savage ecstasy. Into the pale, irresistible arms of a woman who offers him the kiss of demons in exchange for eternal life. A woman so ravishing, so insatiable, that he must say yes again and again until he can no longer say no. He has given her the vital essence of his body. Now she will devour his soul. Yeah, so, first of all, 1980s NYC. Is there a better setting for a novel? I don't think so. So, this is New York, a New York that doesn't exist anymore. This is an urban jungle bathed in neon. This is back when peep shows and strip joints, movie palaces and video stores and adult bookstores were everywhere. This is back when prostitutes and hobos were all over the place, and there was garbage on the streets and piss and shit everywhere, long before Disney moved in, long before Giuliani kind of cleaned everything up. It is a wonderful setting for a novel. So, as the synopsis tells us, Davey Owen, our protagonist, isn't having a very good day. That morning, the morning of when the book starts, his girlfriend finally is leaving him. She's packing up her stuff, admitting to him that she's been cheating on him because she's sick of dating sort of a spineless dude who never sticks up for himself, that gets walked on by everybody, including her. And she's had enough. She also thinks that he's working a dead-end job, and he's never going to sort of rise up above his current situation. Davey is currently an editorial assistant for a tawdry magazine in New York City. So this day, he takes a lunch break and he's walking through the red light district in Manhattan. And he passes this sort of unassuming little peep show place called Live Girls. And curiosity gets the better of him, and he goes inside. And, he exchanges a dollar bill for some tokens, and he receives them from this beautiful, ghostly hand that sort of emerges out of the blackness of the this gated window at the front of the store. And then he kind of goes inside this waiting room with all these strange men are waiting to enter the booths. And after this old guy with terrible breath exits the booth, Davey goes in, and it's pitch black in there, save for this red blinking light that's on the coin slot. And he puts in some coins, and then a rectangular section of the wall rises. And behind the kind of thick smudged glass, he sees this beautiful onyx-haired beauty kind of dancing behind the glass slowly and sensuously. And Davey, gets the impression that she wants him to tip her. So he puts some money, or he goes to the little slot there. There's a little hole in the window. And he goes to put in a tip for her, and she grabs his hand, and then this woman just pulls his hand inward and starts feeling it along her thigh and up her body. And Davey is kind of shocked, and he's thinking damn, is this even legal? Well, this girl's doing it, so it must be okay. And she starts to have him feel other parts of her body. And then Davey kind of takes his hand away. And then the woman puts her hand through the window, through the like the little opening in the window, and starts feeling him up. And then she kind of takes him in her hands and guides him to like the window and the hole in the window, and then starts doing some real interactive work through the window. And let's just say Davey has a great time. But at a certain moment, things get a little wild, and she does tend to, like, she kind of bites him, or like he feels like a pain in his groin. And when he leaves, he's definitely bleeding around his crotch. He definitely has some damage that had happened there. And so anyway, David goes back to work, and now he's sort of unloading his grief and his disappointment for recently like missing out on like a promotion at work with his close friend Casey. Casey is a girl who also works at this publishing house, a girl that they had like briefly like had a fling with once. But it never went anywhere. But not for lack of trying on her part, Casey, because she genuinely likes this Davey guy. She does admit that he's a little spineless, and she kind of is disappointed that he's so hung up on this girl who recently left him that she thinks doesn't deserve him. And Davey, of course, is like totally clueless about this girl who would like totally be a good girlfriend to him. But, he's sort of like talking with her about like, just his difficulties and the fact that his girlfriend left him that morning. And then to add insult to injury, the office jerk, Chad, comes sauntering into like the break room and saying that, they should be congratulating him because he has just gotten the editorial, I guess the assistant editor position that Davey was kind of gunning for and that he, by all rights deserved. And then he says, and by the way, the boss lady wants to see you, Davey, in his office. And so Davey gets kind of called in to the office, but not before going into the restroom and kind of checking himself out, his groin, and definitely seeing that his briefs are splotched with blood. That's not good. Like he's thinking like, did I cut myself? Like, or did the girl bite me or something? Like, what's going on? And he's not looking too good when he takes a look in the mirror. And then he goes into his boss's office. And, and just to make the day even worse, then his boss starts castigating him for, recommending all of these pansy humanitarian articles for the magazine. When she's like, our customer base, they are, Second Amendment loving Reagan Republicans who, just want to be titillated with explosions and gunfire and violence, not this crap that you're like recommending. And she low-key like kind of threatens him and says, don't make mistakes like that again, or your job will be compromised. And then, Davey, in a moment of, remembering what Casey said about how he never sticks up for himself, he gets a moment of sort of courage, and he's emboldened to bring up the fact that she passed him over for the assistant editor position that he was really like hoping for. And the boss lady, the head editor, she sort of intimates that Chad, he and I spend he spends more time with me, and he really knows what I want, and he gives me what I want. And then she intimates like, if you took the time to spend a little more time with me, and if you knew what I wanted, you might be in the running too. So it's like some straight up like Me Too shit, but only with the gender swap. And Davey is like kind of shocked, but he does like for a moment stick up for himself, and he says, like, there's not a chance in hell, like I would never do that. And then he says, I'm quitting. And he just like he storms out of there, and he quits, and decides like he's not going to come back. So, as he's cleaning out his things at his work, he's feeling satisfied with himself for sticking up for himself. And when he goes outside, though, when he's going to leave, he has a sudden impulse that he needs to go back to Live Girls. He needs to see this woman, this mysterious black-haired woman again, and he does. And he goes back, and then when he leaves again, he's got some bloody splotches on his underwear, and his crotch is bleeding again. Now, meanwhile, while all this is going on, we also meet a character named Walter Benedict, who arrives at his sister's house to give her some unfortunate news because his sister had asked this guy, Walter, to kind of check out her husband, follow her husband, who had been acting very strange and out of sorts the last, like recently, the last few days. And Walter started like kind of following his brother-in-law, his sister's husband, and he found out that this guy had kept going every day after work to a peep show in Times Square called Live Girls. So, he's going back to like kind of deliver this unfortunate news to his sister. And when he gets to her apartment, he's kind of surprised to find that the door is unlocked. His sister doesn't answer the door when he rings it, so he goes inside, and he is shocked to find his sister lying on the floor with her throat ripped open. And I will read a little paragraph or a little excerpt of him discovering the body. Let's see. Her robe was open, and her nightgown was torn nearly all the way down the front, exposing her flesh, which was now marble white. Her mouse-brown hair was tangled and stringy with blood. Her eyes and mouth were wide open. So was her throat. The flesh had been torn open, clearly exposing blood, gristle, and her trachea. It looked like a garden hose that had been chewed in two by a dog. Her flesh had been torn open all the way down to her chest, and pinkish white bone showed through the drying blood. Her hands were the worst. The fingers of one hand were tangled in the tendons that ran along her neck, and the fingers of the other were clutching her left clavicle, like a choking man trying to pull away the tight collar of his shirt. Really great descriptions. He then finds his little niece in the other room with her shirt ripped open and half her breast torn off and just dangling from her chest. And then he follows the blood tracks down the hall, which lead to the master bedroom, and he finds his brother-in-law's blood-soaked clothes scattered on the bed and like on the dresser drawer, but no sign of the brother-in-law anywhere. His sister's husband has vanished, and her and her daughter like horribly mutilated. So Benedict, looking for the brother-in-law, starts staking out this Live Girls, the place where he saw the guy going all the time, and really like wanting to find this guy, and obviously like assuming that this is the person who murdered his sister and niece, and wanting to murder him himself. Really, so angry, right? And he doesn't find his brother-in-law, but who he does notice keep returning to this place is this other kind of clean-cut young man, a guy who seems sort of out of place in this seedy, unscrupulous-looking peep show joint. But he keeps seeing this guy go, and he notices that whenever the guy leaves the place, he's like kind of limping and looks like almost drained, like he's been like enervated or something. And Walter decides that he's going to keep watching him and maybe like keep an eye on him and start following him. We also meet briefly the mysterious proprietor of Live Girls in a kind of a neat scene where this mysterious man kind of goes out on Times Square and gets finds a prostitute and lures her back to Live Girls, saying that for $200 he would like to I guess hire her on behalf of his female friend. And the girl goes to Live Girls, and when she steps inside, she is met by this frightening pale woman with red hair and tantalizing green eyes, who approaches her kind of out of the darkness with these big fangs and kind of has her way with her. And then worse, when she's done with the prostitute, she throws her down this trap door in the establishment and feeds her to these horribly frightening winged creatures that are sort of just like writhing down there beneath the building, which go about just tearing into the young girl's corpse and just feeding on her blood. And so Now, Davey, meanwhile, just cannot get the thought of this mysterious, dark-haired woman out of his mind. He just keeps thinking about her, and he just like has to like feels this compulsion to go back. So he does actually go back to Live Girls, and we get this great cinematic image of him getting off the bus in Times Square, and it's raining, and he's facing the store as the bus kind of drives away, finally revealing it. And the neon is being reflected off the wet pavement as the rain's coming down, and the cars are driving by, and then he sees outside. He sees this tall, slender woman about to get into a cab, and he looks closely and notices that it's that woman that was in the booth, the woman that he had such a great time with multiple times, and he runs up to her as she's getting into a cab, and he kind of introduces himself and says, "Look, I came recently. I came like 2 or 3 times in the last 24 hours. He's like, I was hoping to kind of see you again. Where are you going?" And then this woman, she kind of smiles, like looks at him, like kind of appraises him, and says, "Oh," she's like, "Well, yeah, I'm going to my other job." And she says she works at this nightclub called the Midnight Club. And she says, if you'd like to come along. And so Davey's like, "Of course I would." So they go, and it's this super exclusive club. Of course, she gets him in easily, and she gets him a table even, and then she disappears. And then when a show starts, she's on the stage, and it's just this insane performance where this like old church hymn that he knew from childhood starts playing, and this large white crucifix starts coming down from the ceiling. It's bathed in red light, and then this girl, the black-haired girl, appears on the stage with this other dancer, and they start basically just dancing around the cross. Like it's a strip pole, and just like kind of rubbing against it, and just doing wild things with it. And Davey is just totally caught off guard and just very surprised. And she just does this really sexy dance, and then later comes back, and Davey's all flustered, and he's like, "Wow, that was amazing." She orders drinks. Davey orders like a ridiculously priced gimlet. She orders this mysterious brownish red drink that she's drinking. They call it the house special, only for the the members. I wonder what that could be. And they're drinking, and Davey is just really like just so into her, and he just like needs more. And he suggests, he's like, "Hey, like, can we like maybe hang out somewhere a little more private?" And she like looks at him again and smiles, and it seems like she's very happy about all this. And she says, "Yeah, you know what, after my last show, why don't let's get out of here, we'll go back to my place." And he's like, "Oh, that's nice." And and then she gets up to leave, actually, and then Davey actually points at her brownish red drink and says, "Aren't you going to finish your drink before you leave?" And she says, "No, I don't think I'll be needing that anymore." And you're just like, "Oh shit, yeah, she's not going to be needing that drink. She's going to be drinking something else tonight, right?" So yeah, so they eventually make their way, Davey and this girl, whose name he finds out is Anya, and they go back to her apartment, which is dark and chilly. And by the way, everything about this Anya girl is cool and cold and chilly, from like the cool, pale hands and her chilly, sort of cool, poised demeanor. And they go inside. And she quickly and violently, almost, and passionately starts like making moves on him, just kissing him. And Davey's a little taken aback. He kind of like resists a little bit. And she's like, "Isn't this what you wanted?" And Davey says, "Well, yeah, I did. I didn't think it would be so sudden like this." And she kind of smiles at him and says, "You are a weak person, aren't you, Davey?" She's like the second or third person to tell him this, like in the course of like 2 days. And and eventually Davey kind of lets loose a little bit, and they have just like the most amazing bout of just foreplay even before anything else. And in this moment when Davey is with her, he is forgetting all of his problems, the fact that his girlfriend recently left him, the fact that he was passed over for the promotion and then quit his job on a whim, basically, and the fact that he's just struggling in this big hard city. Nothing matters, just the fact that she's with him. They have just amazing foreplay, and then eventually, she starts riding him, and then she exposes her neck and commands him to bite her. She's like, "Bite me," and and he's trying to kiss her, and she's like, "No, don't! You're not kissing me." She like basically clamps his head over her neck and says, "Bite me now." And Davey, being the complier, he complies and he bites her. And basically, like, his climax coincides with another sort of emission. A salty thing fills his mouth, her blood, and she says, like, "Suck it in, eat it, Davey." And so he's like drinking down her blood, and basically, and then he finally just like kind of collapses and unconsciously. And then later, when he wakes up, he has a bandage between his legs. And Anya tells him it's time to go. And then he looks and realizes that there are little puncture marks actually around his groin. And then he's like, "Damn, like, this girl really has been biting me down there." And when he's like leaving the apartment, he tells her, like, "Well, will I ever see you again?" And then Anya looks at him and says, "Yes, you'll have to see me again," right? He wakes up the next day basically screaming, with like having a terrible dream and nauseous, and just feeling like crap. And he goes back to Live Girls to talk to Anya, to ask her, like, what the hell happened last night? Like, did you do something to me? And she tells him to meet her in front of her apartment building, like when she gets off work in a couple of hours. And he goes, and then as he's leaving Live Girls, he gets approached actually by that Walter Benedict, the guy who has been following him, and the guy that was looking for his brother-in-law because his sister died. And he starts by kind of posing as a journalist, saying, "Hey, I'm doing a report on like sex clubs in the city, and I was wondering if I could like offer you a drink, and it'll be totally anonymous if you answer some questions." And so Davey kind of like agrees to go to a bar with this guy. The guy starts buying him drinks, plowing him with liquor to getting him drunk. And Davey like opens up and tells this guy all about Live Girls and this mysterious woman, Anya, he's just like the most amazing woman he's ever met, and just like the things that they've done together. And the guy then sort of like levels with him and says, "Look, I'm not like a journalist," but he tells him about his brother-in-law and the fact that his brother-in-law definitely started changing after he was going to this Live Girls, and that eventually, Benedict found his sister and his niece brutally murdered and this guy gone. And he tells Davey, like, you need to stay away from that place. It seems sketchy as fuck. And he's like, "You know what? You also probably need to get checked out." He says, "My wife is a doctor. She can look at you and like see like what's wrong with you, right? Because you definitely look the worse for wear." And Davey resists. He doesn't want to hear it because Davey he's floating on a river, right? And that river is called denial. He doesn't want, but he can't deny the fact that he does look and feel like shit. And it's ever since he's been with this woman Anya. Like, God forbid, like, did he contract something from her? Did he get something? He doesn't know. So he shows up after this meeting with the guy Walter. He shows back up at Anya's apartment, and sees that the bite marks actually from when he had bitten her are gone. Like, there's nothing there, and he's not sure, like, and when he has these questions, he tries to ask her questions, but her sexual sort of like power overtakes him, and he just can't, he just can't like resist her, and just like all of his questions go by the wayside when he's around her. But he's definitely changing. When his friend Casey from work comes to check on him in his apartment, despite looking like death, he seems to now be exuding this new sort of sexual confidence that was never there before. And he goes for Casey and starts like making moves on her, and she's like totally shocked by it because this dude was like a total pussy all the time, would like never make a move on her, and she's digging it. She thinks like, man, like this would be great if it wasn't for my time of the month right now. But Casey is not going to be Casey's not deterred by that. Or Davey's the dude. He actually is intrigued, and the fact that it is her time of the month does not stop him. And we get a wonderful scene actually of him going down on her, and then her looking up at his face and just seeing smears of blood glistening around his mouth. Good old Davey earning his Red Wings, right? But yeah, you guessed it. Davey, these feelings, these changes that are going through him, this feeling, the odd feelings of hunger, but without having an appetite, the yearning for blood and the need for blood. Davey, as Anya tells him, is getting ready for death and rebirth. And, as he's lying in bed one night, he sees Anya floating outside his window, up on his, ninth story window, and she's scratching at the glass in a very Salem's Lot inspired scene. The only difference is this time he opens the window, lets her in, and they bang, and then she tells him that, he's going to be dead by morning, but then reborn, and that everything will be better, because now he's going to have the blood of gods coursing through his veins, and he's going to be immortal like her as soon as the transfusion is complete, because as we all guessed it, Davey is going to be reborn as a vampire, and so that is that's kind of where this all goes. But as I mentioned before, I love the fact that this book is set in 1980s New York City is one of the best things about this book. I absolutely love that setting. New York in the 80s, it was just a different city back then, right? And Garton does a great job of conveying the squalor of the city. And for a guy who didn't live there, I thought he did a good job. I thought he did a pretty good job. I love this description he gives of Times Square. He says, it held a sort of pathetic beauty, like an old, gritty, low-budget movie that tries hard to entertain. And, I would say some other novels of this era that really depict that era of New York well are Skip Inspector's The Light at the End, and probably, definitely my favorite of the bunch would be John Shirley's Cellars, which is just fantastic, really good, but kind of early 80s New York City. And that one, has to do with mutant kids who are stalking and sacrificing rich people, citygoers who they can ritualistically sort of sacrifice to this ancient Lovecraftian monster that's living beneath, in the sewers of the city. It's just awesome. But the writing quality here is, as always with Garton, is good. He's a great writer just on a technical level. He just composes sentences fluidly, and they're always vivid and cinematic. I would definitely put him up there. He's I would say John Shirley is also on that level, similar level as Garton. That was really well done. I thought, this book has a lot of sex. There's a lot of sexy time in here, and it could be cringy in the hand of most writers, especially the first time that Davey goes into Live Girls, and that first sort of interplay between him and Anya between the glass, and she's got her hand through the window and he's got his. It could have been super cringy, but I thought he pulled it off fairly well. Great violence in this book as well, as you saw in that little excerpt I read. The gore is well done. I mean, there's a reason that Garton at the time was sort of lumped in with the splatterpunk movement. He definitely describes gore well. The characters also were pretty good here. I love the character of Casey, Davey's co-worker and friend, the girl that's trying to get with him and trying to help him out. I love, she's just a cool, strong character. I love when the asshole Chad one day is, calling her babe. She just nonchalantly says, Chad, I've told you before to stop calling me babe. If you do it again, I'm going to sneak into your apartment one night and poke holes in all your rubbers. That's just great. You go, girl, right? You tell that male chauvinist pig, that 80s asshole, that. But, of course, Garton kind of uses that character almost in a male fantasy sort of way. It's that character that's the perfect girl that's right there at your fingertips, but that, you don't necessarily notice right away or appreciate. But, Yeah, of course, the star of this novel is definitely Anya, the mysterious onyx-haired girl from Live Girls who sort of turns Davey into a vampire. She's just like this ravishing sexual force of nature. The kind of girl that any person would just kill for. So I mean, you understand why Davey's like so obsessed with her. And for a moment, I almost thought that this novel was going to like be a book about like self-actualization and sort of like the realization of one's true potential, because I thought, Davey was such a sad sack in the beginning, such a weak kind of like just like pushover. And then suddenly, after sort of like turning into the vampire, he starts to like gain this newfound confidence. And I thought like, wow, is this going to be like a like show it that way? But no, it doesn't. It doesn't like make vampirism like alluring and cool as I thought it would be. Davey does sort of change as a character, but it's not as a result of like actually turning into the vampire. But yeah, but there are different ways like you could take this book. Like I think much like David Cronenberg's remake of The Fly, you could see this book could work on like a metaphorical level as like a book talking about like contracting like say disease, like especially sexually transmitted disease, in this case, and sort of like the ensuing gradual like changes that the body goes through, like after having sex with a partner, especially the fear of that after having sex with like a Times Square peep show like stripper, right? It's something that's probably happened to a few people. There's also a very salient sort of drug addiction subtext. In fact, one of the really cool things about this book is also that it explores what would happen to vampires if they fed on the wrong blood, if they drank the blood of someone with, say, like a compromised system, say like a drug addict, someone who had like toxic blood, and what that could do to you and how that could like fuck you up and turn you into like some awful creature. That was really cool. Of course, this book also has to do with sort of rejecting one's oppressive religious upbringing. The way that this character Davey is sort of haunted by like kind of memories and messages from his deceased mother, who basically like cursed him as a child, and just because of like the strict upbringing, sort of it suggested like hobbled his masculinity and like pro-social maturity. And Garton himself was actually raised in a fundamental Christian household, I believe, and sort of like quote unquote escaped, as he put it. And so he's kind of like dealing with that in I think a number of his books that kind of comes up, that idea. But there's also some, I wrote down here, some almost like LGBTQ stuff. There is a little sapphic eroticism going on, which is cool. And it's actually, this book is almost kind of woke for 1987. It's kind of got like a subtle commentary on like toxic masculinity. For example, like characters like the douchey office guy, Chad, this guy, here's a guy who makes pickup lines like, so what's your sign? Oh, Aries? I'm a Sagittarius. I'm a little rusty on my astrology, but if I'm not mistaken, tonight's the night my Milky Way is supposed to slide into Uranus, right? Guys like that definitely get their gruesome comeuppance in this book. Possibly in nightclub restrooms. But this book was pretty fun. It definitely culminates in a great climax in Live Girls. Pretty explosive climax, although it does end in a sort of to be continued way. And I was actually, I was talking about this earlier today with my buddy Chris, and I mentioned that it almost feels like the pilot of like a TV series. It feels oddly truncated or like curtailed almost, like it should continue. And there is a sequel to this called Nightlife, which I guess I have to read now, and I definitely do want to. But Yeah, it's like, it kind of ends with like, okay, well, what next, right? Like, what's going to happen next? So it feels like but that's often the case with these books. They just kind of like end, like you feel like, oh, okay, there could have been a little more resolution there. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy this book. Very well written. Garden never fails to impress with, his execution. And I thought it had some great, erotic, sexy scenes and some cool, violent scenes as well. I think this one is slightly, it's really highly spoken of, and I can see why. I have read some other Garton books that I liked a little more than this. I'm a big fan of his first novel, Seductions. Darklings was fun. Crucifix. Or Crucifix Autumn, as I think he originally titled it, is a really fun like 80s LA book. But yeah, this one is definitely good, and I'm happy I read it. Definitely want to read the sequel. I would recommend this book if you are into this era of vintage horror, especially if you like sort of like 1980s New York City and that whole ambiance. Really, really well rendered and evocative there. So yeah, Live Girls, fun book. That's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the review. Check back soon, I should say, for more book reviews and probably another collection update next weekend. Until then, take it easy. I'll see you later. Peace out.